Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started with our Human Resources meeting. Today's date is March 5th, 2026. The time is 10 a.m. In attendance are Commissioners Eberline, Duncan, and Matari. Calling this meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Public comment. Anyone wish to speak? Hearing none. We'll move into our first item, jail overtime, Sheriff's Office, and I have Undersheriff Nelson and Captain Jeremy Hyle.
Good morning, Commissioners. Undersheriff Brett Nelson for the record. We come before the board seeking some clarification in regards to our overtime budget. Obviously, we had an oversight in the last budget year, and we have we underfunded that. And we're seeking some guidance as to getting some funds transferred, if you will, within the county to supplement our overtime for the remainder of the year.
Questions? How much are you asking for?
Jeremy, can we come up? I believe it's a total 1.5, right?
For our figure, Captain Jeremy Hyle for the record, for our figure is 1.589 million unloaded, and I'm not sure if we got the loaded number back from that. Brandy has that, she says.
You want to give that to us? Because that's what we're looking at, is adding that much more to the budget, right? That's on top of what was asked for in the budget, is that correct?
Correct, yeah. Okay, so $1,589,327 unloaded would be $1,957,574 approximately loaded when you include retirement and taxes and all that good stuff. So the original budget was $925,000 unloaded, so the total unloaded overtime budget would be $2,514,327.
$2,514,000 and how much?
$327.
Okay. How'd you guys arrive at that number?
The Sheriff's Office, so we took the guidance that you gave us the last meeting about taking our unfunded position, or our open positions, and times and a half to try to give us a baseline for overtime. That was in the last meeting that I presented. But what we found is that doesn't actually work, because we have a number of positions that are filled that are not helping with staffing, so it's causing overtime with the new hires that are in the academy or in training. So that also doesn't affect the specialized units, court transport, the extradition, things like that. So what we did was we broke the hours from the beginning of the fiscal year based on floor staffing, tower staffing, the court-ordered things, extraditions and transports, and then the rest of the overtime with meetings in court and stuff like that. And we averaged out what we've already spent with the hours and where we're trending with our overtime, and projected that through the end of the year. And we're using the jail sergeant pay as a baseline because that's mid-range between the highest patrol sergeant that's working overtime and the lowest deputy that's working overtime. That should give us some wiggle room. And as we get these trainees that are in training, as we get them out of the academy and out of training, they will start, for one, affecting staffing to lower overtime, and they will, the overtime that they work will be much lower than the jail sergeant overtime that we're projecting it at.
Are there any thoughts on this? I mean, it's only $1.9 million more than what we budgeted.
So, Brandy, in the past, and I don't know if you can just answer this, the jail overtime is usually always been run over. Is that correct?
Yes, I think I even sent you an analysis from FY22 to the present. Jail overtime has been over for many, many years, but salary savings have not been enough to cover that overage since FY22.
Right. So the Sheriff's Department as a whole, combining both patrol and jail, have they gone over since 20 21, 22?
Since I've been at the county, FY '25 is the first year that the sheriff's office as a whole went over budget. And the biggest drivers was the jail.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, there was stuff that, with the medical that we can't control necessarily, and,
I think the medical was on budget for '25, so
Okay.
any overage, that overage for that was not counted in that.
but did the unanticipated revenue cover that overage?
So what we ended up doing, yes, was we had some unanticipated prisoner housing revenue that we were able to use some of that to help cover the budget overage for the jail, yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, at this point, they're on top of it and trying to mitigate as much as possible, getting these people trained and on the floor. And again, I think direction from the board would be, obviously, look at everything you can to keep the costs down at this point. And then the transports, do they incur overtime?
Yes, they do.
Okay. So is that because it's the day that they're out, or?
It's because, so there's extraditions where we fly them out, we drive inmates around the state or the area, and then the court transport running inmates down to the new court
IDOC.
hold.
Oh,
All of that
okay.
is because we're understaffed in all of those positions to include the floor. With
Okay.
an analysis, we're working with Brandy. If we were fully staffed with all of our positions, we would have enough people in all of these, not just the floor and the tower, but the special units to limit overtime. But because we're so short-staffed, and we have historically been so short-staffed, we don't have enough people in any of those units. So what Brandy has learned, that we've learned, is the specialized units, their overtime is incurring because they're covering for themselves, because it's court-mandated stuff that we can't control.
Okay. And then, Brandy, one last question. The sheriff's budget overall, is it trending over budget for 42% of the year? That,
I'd have to run a report to look at the
Okay.
sheriff as a whole, so I don't know off the top of my head right now.
okay.
Our budget officer says we're on point other than jail overtime.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, here's the issue a little bit, is the fact that for the past several years, you've been asking way too little for your overtime. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
I mean, to the tune of about 3.6 million. This year, it'll end up aggregating at over 5 million. So my question is why? Why is this happening and we don't know it? Now, the way the jail is set up, it's a staffing model, right? And on occasion, you need more staffing, I guess, for higher risk inmates.
To an extent, we did a staff analysis and set a hard number for our minimums. And that number has been, through the agency or through the jail through the years, it has wavered. So I came in and for liability purposes, we did an analysis. This is how many people we need to staff the jail at a minimum. And we're not even meeting those minimums. Our sergeants are working understaffed because they're concerned about calling twice as many people in on overtime because, say we need 13 as our minimum. We have our highest number of people on one shift is 9. We don't have 9, we can't make 9 at a 13, so they're running with low numbers.
So what are you budgeting for? How many shifts how many people are you budgeting for a shift?
Well, currently with the model we're doing right now, it's gonna be 13 per shift, but it's also.
Yeah, but what have you been doing for the last several years? I mean, because the problem is that, we've had this discussion before where if you give us a number that's too low, and in this situation, it's not too low by a couple $100,000, it's too low by, $1.5 million, right? So, we're thinking that we're getting a balanced budget. The board doesn't take the tax base that it needs to, right? So then it turns out that we're off. And I understand that there's revenues coming in from the jail, and that's good, right? No one has a crystal ball to know exactly how much revenue is coming in, but we should be able to have a crystal ball on our cost structure for the most part, because the jail hasn't changed in size for the last several years, right? So we should know how much manpower we need. And then, so, we're off by so much, and I'm trying to figure out what are we asking for in our budgets? If you need 13, what have you been asking for the last couple of years?
Commissioner, with all due respect, the last 2 years, we've been told to remain flat, and we've told them to make it whole. Going back even further, Captain D can speak to it. In 2018, he sent us a document where at this same point of the year, I think it was February, the jail budget was 222%. Not saying it's a cultural thing, but that's the way it's always been, is the fact that we make you whole. The reality is you're asking, just like now, total cost recovery. We'll gladly ask going forward, this point forward, of what we need. But to the point being is, this has been a historical thing, and Captain Deke, you can speak to it if we want.
Yeah, Brandy alluded to it in what she had said, that for the last couple of years, which is outside the jail's ability to affect their own finances, the board cut the positions that were vacant for more than 100 days. And there were 15 or 16 of those, cut that funding to 50%. That has historically been relied upon, and Commissioner Matari, I think a month ago, you recognized it. How do we fund these vacant positions where somebody has to do the job of these people who are not here in these positions? So
Who are not hired.
who are not hired, yeah. So that's where we're filling those positions in. But there's no money there to pay that overtime. So that overtime budget is now extended out. That has not been there for other than the last couple of years, the 50% reduction. The jail doesn't have that option to set the budget. You guys do.
Well, yeah, but the board is reliant upon the expertise of the sheriff's office to say we have to fill these hours, right? So when you ask for money, if you,
Standard since, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We've been doing that since I've been a captain 16 years ago.
okay,
It started in 2011. I asked for $220,000, or I asked for $785,000, and the board approved $220,000. Why? Because there was salary savings in all those unfilled positions to offset that negative.
yeah.
And it's just exponentially gone up over the years, but the last 2 years, that hasn't been there. It's been dropped to 50%.
Well, again,
Part of the equation is it falls back to all of our responsibilities, not just 100% on
yeah, I think a few,
budgeting.
I think a few $100,000 is not a big deal. It's just when it,
$200,000, it's $1 million or more.
well, that's what it's becoming now, right? And so, there is a reliance on expertise that says we have to fill these hours somehow. So if you don't give us the money for this, how do you expect us to meet our minimum standards?
So I think everybody understands that in the room, and the captain certainly acknowledged that. Going forward, great, next year for FY '27 planning, they plan their full overtime budget, and if there's salary savings there, there is. If there isn't, they still have to plan for that overtime to fill it. But that hasn't been the past practice of prior boards, and even last year.
Well, would you agree that they were doing it correctly as a past practice for budgeting?
Who's they? The board or?
The board, the sheriff's office? I mean, you've been saying it's been
So when they
happening
say
for
don't ask for
10
the
years.
overtime, the salary salvage will cover those things. And it was prior to Brandy as well, that those decisions were made
Yeah.
at the auditor level, that, hey, we have this money that likely won't get filled through the year because we've only been able to hire 7 or 8 deputies through the year, and there's 16 vacancies, so we're never gonna have money left over to fund that overtime. And that's a board decision, it's not a jail decision.
Well, I think where the difference is that it's one thing for you to say, this is how much I need in order to do my job,
Yep.
right? This is the total number of hours it takes to fill the jail. This is how much that costs in order to meet standards.
Right.
And then the board, and you say, I need X dollars, and then the board says, no, we're not going to give it to you. Well, then the question becomes, how do you go about meeting your minimum standards if we don't give you the money to do that, right?
I wanted to also, just for some context, for FY '26, when we're looking at just detention deputies that were budgeted, so the positions that were cut by 50%, that was $500,000 that was cut from the jail A budget. So even if those had been funded at 100%, the salary savings were still $1 million short of covering how far over the jail's overtime budget did go.
And the perfect storm lines up when you're able to hire these people finally, because again, cyclical nature of government is that it's just always a push and pull with private industry. And so now we're seeing a lot more applications and a lot more people getting hired. So then you have to, kind of ratchet it back and then realize we're going to be in a good spot for a while until things improve in the business sector, then we're going to lose a bunch of people to private sector. It's just one of those ebb and flow things. So I agree with we need to be funding them where they're at. It's just historically, until last year, we've been able, it's been covered with the openings and,
Has not been
well,
covered
see,
for 4 years.
and
well,
here's,
for with patrol, because you said that,
If you take in the total share.
correct, I'm
but
talking
when
about total.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
but
I'm
what-
talking about total.
Yeah, I just really want people to understand, even if you fund the jail positions at 100%, that
It-
is not enough.
But it's
Right,
not just
for
the
the-
vacancies
yeah.
either, it's also those people like the captain alluded to. There's 8 to 10 people that are unusable, that are still in
Correct.
that training academy process. And it takes a year for that deputy from the start, so we're already a year behind. This problem's not gonna fix itself for another year and a half.
well, hold on, but can't you take into account for those things? I mean, you hire someone, they get through post, they're gonna be in training, right? Isn't that taken into account when the budget is being crafted?
It does,
Yes.
but there, you also have attrition. We can't predict when somebody's gonna leave and go to Coeur d'Alene or Spokane or somewhere, else, or just get tired of doing what they're doing or retiring.
Well-
Those are all attrition that happens, and we lose 2 to 3 a year historically at maybe even more than that.
I mean, I get
So
that
it's a-
part, but the part that, that we're dealing with a set number of hours
Right.
that you need at the jail, is that correct? A set number of hours. So we should know what those hours are at all times. And if they're 0% filled, that's time and a half. If they're 50% filled, 50% are at regular time and 50% are at time and a half. Would you agree with that as a general rule of thumb for budgeting?
In a general
Yes.
sense, but you don't have, if 50% of them are filled and they're new hires, you still are at that 0 mark until a year later.
Commissioner, if I may add,
Right.
you spoke about how running the business. I've complimented the board in regards to how we've changed it. It hasn't been the best practice, and we're trying to evolve into best practice for all, whether it's the sheriff's office or the county as a whole. The mere fact of it is, you and I have spoken about it, and I've spoken to Commissioner Duncan about it. Our population hasn't changed greatly over the past few years, but what has changed greatly and immensely is internally the special handling of inmates for mental health, agitated states, whatever it is. That's where it takes into account the extra staffing to bring people in and transport them and move them within the facility.
So $1 million extra for that?
In totality, with everything else, yes, sir.
Well, I
Not
mean,
just for that, but you talk about, we've hired more, we've reduced our openings from, 30-some to 15 as of today. So we have more people that are, as we try to explain the process, we don't run a business as much as we're trying to run the business under the guidance of the county, but we're also trying to explain to you the needs and how the business is run within the internal walls of the jail.
well, I understand the explaining part, what I'm really hoping for is an illustration part, because you obviously arrived at these numbers somehow, right? I mean, was there a spreadsheet used to develop this? Or, I mean, did you just do this on a piece of paper and just write some stuff out? I mean, I'm asking because if you don't get into that kind of detail to understand what makes up the operation, it's very hard moving forward to come forward with a budget that we can live with. If that makes sense. Does that?
Yes.
I mean,
Just like everything else in short order, we're trying to do this when we've never been had to do that before. Not saying
So-
it's right, sir, but we're trying to move forward in regards to the historical perspective from Captain Deke in his 16 years as a captain before coming over to the ops side or the support side. We're asking a short period of time to come up with this, these measurables. You talk about staffing, minimum staffing. There are no minimum staffings other than what we have within our own walls for a safety perspective. We're trying to evaluate and determine.
and it's not a short time. It's been a multi-year issue. I mean, it really has been, I mean, I think that we can all agree that just blowing past budgets is not our best work. I mean, I understand the concept of making people whole, and there's usually a good reason for it, and I don't have any problem with that, but my question is, if we can't be confident with the numbers in the past, how are we going to be confident in the numbers for FY27? How are they going to be developed? Is it going to be just based upon what we spent this year? And we're just going to say, let's just copy that? Or are we going to say, this is how we arrived at this number? And so that we can monitor that throughout the year and make sure that, our model is close to what we expect it to be. Things are always changing. I get that. People are being hired, people are, quitting, being fired, whatever that is. But there's a certain number of hours you have to fill, and it should be a finite number every year.
And I believe the model is being worked on as we
Okay,
speak between
so
our staff
Cap-
and the auditor's office.
Captain Deke is saying no, so,
It's not a finite number because law enforcement and jail management is a moving target. We can't estimate how many mental health holds we're gonna have next year, how many guys are gonna commit suicide, how many judges are gonna order some transport, emergency transport, how many judges want their guy from Colorado extradited tomorrow because they missed the date and we've gotta go get him, or how many guys are gonna call in sick, or FMLA events, or IODs. All of that is not a finite number. It is a complete moving target, and it's what drives what's going on. And you add to that overburden of staff because they've been at minimum staff or less than that for the last 15 years. It's a huge amoeba that you can't wrap your arms around.
So-
You're asking it to be finite. I don't think that you can.
Well-
I think you're gonna get a plus or minus 10% margin on all that stuff because
Okay.
you don't know.
And
You
that,
can't predict it.
that I agree with, because you have historical data that you can look at, right? And then you can do trend analysis on that, right? You can say every year for the last 3 years,
Correct.
it's been increasing by 10% on things that I can't necessarily anticipate, so let's increase that segment of the budget 10%, right? Would you agree with that? Okay, so that's reasonable. I think from a day-to-day perspective, it's impossible to know what's going to happen. That, I think we all can agree on. But your trend analysis should be able to tell you that stuff, and you should come up with a budget. Otherwise, what I'm hearing is, there's no point in doing a budget, because we can't predict anything. And therefore, just leave the check open, blank, until the end of the year, and we'll just figure it out.
Well, if you draw a trend line on what our overtime has done or what's been approved or adopted, those trend lines are pretty similar. They go up and they go up and they go up, and it's 5-10% a year. It doesn't have to be rocket science. I mean, it should be detailed enough to demonstrate those things. But again, going back to those unknowns, the variables, the biggest aggregate in this whole equation is the employee who can or cannot work, or we lose them. That's what exacerbates the whole thing, because every time we lose one, it's another year and a half to replace them. And we don't have an on-deck circle. If you want to fund 15 extra positions so that we can get people through the academy and they're ready to go when the next guy falls out, boom, there's no lag. But that's a taxpayer decision. That's where you have to have
Well,
that pool of resources.
has that been brought before the board by the sheriff's office?
We
Okay, so-
can't even fund the positions we have.
Right.
And then on
So-
top of that, out of our control is there's only a certain amount of academies, like right now, there's only one academy for the year, so we can't hire them in a position because they can't get certified through post within a certain amount of time.
I mean, deep down, it's the cost of doing business. Does the county want to have a secure jail? Do they want to have less litigation? I mean, you reduce the staffing numbers down to 5 or 10 per shift, you're gonna have tort claims because deputies aren't gonna intervene when there's fights or suicides or mental health. or
I don't think
whatever.
anybody's suggesting that.
What's that? No, I know you're not.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Nobody
I'm
is,
devil's advocate.
but we can only work with what we're given, what we're asked to give.
And I think the model's being worked on between Captain Hyle and his staff and Brandy at this point to determine where we're at for minimum staffing for our facility based on the needs within the walls of our jail on a daily basis.
Do you have all the positions you need?
No.
Okay, how long have you not had these positions?
Since the last expansion, probably.
Okay, have they,
I think Captain Holacek was the one in charge of that expansion. At the time, he had asked for, I'm guessing 22 to 23 bodies be added. It was reduced to 15. There's control rooms that are unfinished with the 2 pods coming online. You need, if there's one extra body for supervision, that's 5.5 positions to cover that 24-hour full-time equivalency. So roughly 10 to 15 more bodies.
so why not ask for those, why have we not asked for those positions? And again, if you need, and hold on a second, if you need the hours, that way we can account for them with the overtime. You know, it's just been kind of run in such a way that we need more than what we're asking for. And so we're you know, we can't help you solve your problems if they're not brought before us year after year after year. If we say no to what you ask for because you need it because of minimum standards, shame on the board.
My prediction is you're going to go through all this and it's going to be more than our 3%
Oh, yeah.
Well,
It's way
yeah,
more.
but if we don't quantify what they need, then we're going to have years like last year and the year before where we're not taking the 3%.
I'm not saying that at
Okay,
all. I'm
well
just
then-
saying that it's going to be a very high number, and then this is where triage comes in at the budget season. It's like, okay, so we're gonna do the best we can with prioritizing, and, you know, to your point, this is gonna be a great exercise coming forward, and we'll see what all the needs are and go from there. So at this point, this is something that we kind of have to fund, and I mean, our options are just 2 million in fund balance.
Yeah, so I had a couple points. So I am really concerned that FY '26, we had to dig into fund balance so much for the overtime overage, and we did not really see a huge return to fund balance. And I'm concerned again for FY '27, because we have to consider the scope of what the county is going through, which includes a lot of facility expansions going on, which is gonna increase our overhead costs, as well as our health insurance. And so, yes, the actual overtime budget will exceed our 3% tax increase. And so I would like there to be some parameter saying, this is the overtime amount, and I'm thinking more of the FY '27 budget cycle. There needs to be a methodology. This is the overtime budget, even if it's not funded, be made whole only up to that dollar amount. Because being completely open-ended, I don't think is a wise
Well,
practice long-term. And right now, our only option is fund balance, which I really don't like. I mean, that's money that could be spent on a new 911 center.
But again, we're not, it still could end up at the end that the sheriff's department is whole, depending on the other divisions.
Correct.
Yeah.
We'll see. It
Sure.
didn't happen last year, which is what makes me more pessimistic about FY '27, and where that, you know, if they're at the point where they just don't send anybody to training for the rest of the year to keep
Yep.
themselves whole, that's not exactly a winning scenario either.
Sure.
To be able to make, you know, the other divisions having to take the hit to keep the jail whole, that's not, oh, nobody wants to have to do that either.
So how many hours did you ask for? How many hours of time are you asking for in this request for the additional 1.5 or 1.6 unloaded and just under 2 loaded?
I have it here somewhere, but. Sorry.
Are you asking for the hours for the 1,589,000?
Yeah, it's driven by hours and rate, right?
Yeah.
That's how it was comprised.
So
So,
I believe the hours I was given by the sheriff's office was 20,650 hours, multiplied at a rate of a detention sergeant, grade 3, step 7, which is like a topped out sergeant. And then we included a shift differential in that and multiplied it by time and a half to come up with the hourly rate of 76.97
$76.97?
an hour, which is based on a topped out detention sergeant hourly rate multiplied by the hours the sheriff's
Now,
office.
is every one of those positions going to be filled by a topped-out sergeant?
No.
Okay. I think the issue here is a little more precision. Okay, because otherwise, I presume you're going to have a number of people who are working much less than that for an hourly rate?
Yes.
Okay.
Or
So-
more, yeah. That's why I used that one, because it's in the middle.
Okay, well, do you have a policy in place of how you fill these positions? Do we start with the highest paying person and work our way down? Or do we start with the lowest paying person and work our way up?
Well, we sought some direction, because I know that the board spoke about that, of restricting, if you will, our highest paid employees from working that. Then the burden falls on our newest employees to carry the 7-day-a-week. So the direction that's been given from the sheriff, we'll continue to work with who we can use to utilize to minimize the burden across the board for our entire staff. So if that means from time to time having a detective work in a certain area of the jail to alleviate, to ensure that someone has a day off, then we'll do so.
Is this what has been the case for the last several months for this fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay,
Many hands lighten the load.
excuse me?
Many hands lighten the load.
Yeah, so,
And you get burnout from people and they leave.
I understand, but,
Since then, Captain Hyle's instituted that the detectives aren't being used as often, last resort, if you will, and it's been more circled wagons within the jail itself
Okay.
to fill those positions. Again, tightening the belt, but also furthering the burden or extending the burden a little bit more on the current staff of who we have working.
So what's the average hourly rate that you've been using for the first 5 months of the year?
We've been using the
What-
overtime numbers for the actual numbers that we're paying.
But what's your actual? What have you paid out so far, average hourly rate for overtime, through the point that you did your numbers for this fiscal year?
I don't know the hour.
Okay, because that's a good baseline to use moving forward. Otherwise, if this is a higher number than what you've already incurred, what it does is it kind of pads. It kind of pads what you're asking for, right? And then for FY '27, what are we going to use for that number? Is it going to be the same high rate? And the problem with that is that we have other electeds who have pretty big needs and asks too. And so if we use a higher number than what we're actually using, then all that's going to do is dig into the budget and not have anything for example, the prosecuting attorney's office.
So are you talking for FY '27? Are you talking about right now to cover the 1.9 million?
Well, I'm talking about both.
Okay, well,
because we
right
don't-
now,
For FY '27, we're trying to get through this. So do you want
I
us
understand that, but Mike,
Do you want us to aim high, or do you want us to?
I
aim
want you
low?
to aim where you need it exactly.
Number is.
So what has been the number for the previous several months?
I haven't had an average hourly number. We're going off actual numbers that are being paid out.
So I asked, okay, when I got the number, the 20,650 hours, I said, you need to break this down between the positions working the overtime. And I know that's possible because I know they do that for custody techs. So for a custody tech, I can say, thus far in FY '26, detention sergeants have only worked, 6 or 7% of the overtime in the towers. And I have made that request to the sheriff's office, and they're working on it. So I think it is possible to come up with, of the hours worked thus far in FY '26, how many of those hours have been worked by deputies, by sergeants, by patrol deputies, by lieutenants, whatever, whoever is working this overtime. I do think it is possible for them to come up with that. And so I feel it would be more accurate to break it down, that 20,000 hours, how much of that is per position, and use the average loaded rate, hourly rate for each of those positions to come up with a more accurate overtime estimate.
In part, to further that accuracy within the walls of the sheriff's office, specifically the jail, culturally, it's always been you had staffing overtime and then everything else. Now we're trying to, if you will, individualize or compartmentalize those specific overtimes, transport, medical needs, whatever it may be, because then we can eventually ask our payroll system to, for instance, from an outside perspective, if you're using transport overtime, there's a specific code, so you can go in and calculate that and it tells you right then and there. Right now, we don't have that within our payroll system.
Okay, but we do know that we have been using overtime for the first, let's just say, 4 months, right? Okay, and we should be able to determine an average hourly rate for the overtime we have used between
Right, and
October
in the
1.
last meeting that I
I'm sorry. Between October 1 and January 31. Go ahead, Captain.
Last meeting I presented, you said use open positions to guide that, and we did, and it didn't work. So I'm not an accountant, and we're working with Brandy to try to work this through.
Okay.
But the way you've asked us to do it last time, it didn't work, so we're trying to find a different way. I'm not saying the way we've done it in the past is right. I'm saying that you give us guidance and we try to work within that, and it wasn't working for what we're trying to come up with. And I'm saying, I don't have the number for you. I'm trying to do basic math based on the estimates we have.
Okay, well, this is-
Work with Brandy to narrow that down.
This is the first time I'm hearing it's not working for you. We haven't had that communication exchange, right?
Okay?
So, that's why I'm asking, because I'm just trying to come up with something that is precise enough that we can live with it and move forward, and then that is what the SO would be held to, as far as sticking within the budget. Otherwise, it just becomes an open check, and we should have at least some ability to use the first 4 months of the fiscal year to determine what we need for the last 7 months. Would you
There's also-
agree with that, Captain
Yeah, there's
Deke?
another factor, though, that comes up as we enter into the spring, summer, and fall seasons. Our county population here swells because of transient traffic that comes in, vacation. The jail does the same. It goes from, it'll increase 25% occupancy in the next, 2 to 3 months. That means more medical transports, it means more fights, it means everything. It means more supervision is needed. So again, that overtime, and I'm just speaking out loud so everybody can hear it, because I'm not gonna be here in another month.
Well, actually, Captain Deke, it's interesting you brought that up, because in December, we had that discussion, and I looked at those numbers. And if you look at between May and September, the overtime actually dips, but the population goes up. Because Commissioner Duncan suggested that that might be, a reason for more overtime was with increased population. And I'll be happy to share those charts with you, because I'm looking for any kind of correlation where we can start to understand how to get a handle on the budget. So moving forward, we properly fund the sheriff's office, and we take the tax base that we need to in order to achieve that.
I wanted to say about this overtime project I've been working on, ultimately, the finance director isn't really responsible to be doing this and coming up with the overtime budget. So I worry that people are going to say, Brandy's doing the project and it'll be fine after that. I don't know how to run a jail. I'm doing the best to my abilities at this point, but ultimately the expertise for this budget needs to come from the sheriff's office. And I am assisting where I am able, but I don't want anyone to think that this budget, Brandy came up with a number and that's good. It's not my budget, it's the sheriff's.
I
So
think
just
if
wanted to
it's,
be clear about that.
yeah, no, I think if it is presented on how the numbers came about and methodically, and be able to see, charts and spreadsheets and stuff to show, like, based on some historical trends, based on what we're thinking in the future about the 8 people coming online at a certain time, and things of that nature. So it might just take a while. I would propose then that we just do a conservative estimate of $1 million right now, and then that when this calculation comes up, that we go, revisit it.
Look, I don't mind continuing this conversation. I mean, obviously, something has to be done, but I think we can use the first 4 months and get a pretty good idea of what you're going to need on a monthly basis moving forward, and then set that as the budget, and then let's strive for that.
It is an action item, and they are outside of their spending authority, so.
Well, then let's just increase it to the 1.2 million that the sheriff's office originally asked in FY '24, and we'll revisit it.
So increase an additional 1.2 million, or?
To the 1.2 million. That's plenty of time for us to figure this one out.
Okay.
We should be able to figure this out. It has to be done by June anyhow for FY '27.
So the adopted budget is 925, and the sheriff's office a couple years ago had asked for 1.2. If we bring it up to 1.2, that's only, we can do that and adjust with the board later, but they spend almost $200,000 a month, in overtime, I think, or even per payroll. So that will run out fairly quickly.
You can go up to 1.4. We'll give them a couple months.
Okay.
Just gotta get a handle on this.
You want to make a motion so I can amend the budget?
And you just want to
Is
be
that-
from, since we've used our contingency already.
Master plan,
Okay.
fund balance, basically.
All right, and again, doesn't mean it will be spent, it's just the authority. So I move that we increase the jail overtime budget to 1.4 million.
Second.
Commissioner Eberline,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan.
Aye.
Chairman Tari.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. All right, next up, item 2, Countywide Open Positions Overview, Human Resources, Lexi Pack.
Lexi Pack for the record. Thank you, commissioners. So this is something we were doing regularly with the board for monitoring purposes. If you'd like this to continue, let me know. We kind of had to pause due to some staffing shortages in our department, but I'm happy to pick it up again. Currently, as of March 3rd, we have a total of 75 open positions. This is an increase of 1.52% from the same time period last year, so we're really close. I think it's one position and a partial position compared to last year. Most departments, unfortunately, are up this year, but KCSO is down, and we have a couple positions or departments that are down position-wise. That's kind of a quick overview. I did submit the full version to you guys in the packet.
Any questions?
Nope, thank you.
No?
Okay,
Well,
thanks.
thank you.
And I personally like it every month.
Monthly?
Yeah,
Okay, I can do that.
thank you.
Okay, next up, do we want to go into executive session for these two items?
That's fine.
Then
Yeah.
what we can do is go to public comment before going into executive session. Anyone wish to speak? Anyone on the phone? No? All right, then I'll take a motion to enter an executive session.
I move that we enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 742061B and 1F.
Second.
Commissioner Eberline.
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan.
Aye.
Chair Matari.
Aye. 7:09, I make a motion that we exit executive session 1B with, exit executive session 1B and 1F. And we'll make a motion on item 3 afterwards, and staff to proceed as discussed for item F.
Second.
Pardon me, are you making a motion to exit executive session?
Yes.
Commissioner Eberline,
Aye.
Chair Matari.
Aye. And I move that we approve the parity increase as requested.
Second.
Commissioner Eberline.
Aye.
Chair Matari.
Aye. Okay, 11:10, meeting adjourned.